6 months after the Galactic Council had dismissed humanity as too primitive to help, Captain Sarah Chen sat at the primary council table as an equal. The crystal station still sparkled with starlight, but the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. The final battle had taken place in the Nexus system itself, heart of galactic civilization. The swarm, driven back from dozens of worlds by human tactics and human-trained alien forces, had made their last stand in the most sacred space in the galaxy. Chen remembered that battle clearly. The Swarm Queen, a creature the size of a small moon, had hung in space surrounded by the last of her bioships. She was beautiful in a terrifying way, her flesh pulsing with colors that hurt to look at, her surface covered in weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. The combined fleets of the galaxy had surrounded her, Zephyrian ships with their energy shields powered down, carrying kinetic weapons they had never used before. Construct vessels flying in the chaotic formations humans had taught them. Even Altarian ships, their elegant hulls now scarred from ramming attacks and boarding actions. But it was humans who led the final assault. All ships, Chen had broadcast to the fleet. This ends here. We've chased these things across half the galaxy. Time to finish what we started. The attack was everything the old Galactic Council would have hated. No coordination, no elegant formations, no sophisticated strategy. Just hundreds of warships charging straight at an enemy that could kill them all. The Swarm Queen fought back with weapons that bent space and time. Her bioships launched attacks that should have destroyed entire fleets. But the Allied forces kept coming, hammering her with bullets and bombs, ramming her defenders, boarding her escort vessels with Marines carrying flamethrowers and determination. Commander Sarah Mitchell had led the final boarding party onto the Queen herself. Her assault team cut through the creature's living hull with mining lasers and explosives, fighting through passages that tried to digest them, breathing air that was more poison than atmosphere. They found the Queen's core chamber, a vast space filled with pulsing organic computers that controlled the entire swarm network. The Queen herself was there, a being of impossible beauty and alien intelligence, her mind touching theirs with thoughts of surrender and peace. But Mitchell and her team were human. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the Queen's psychic abilities. They wore mental shields developed from Mentari technology, but powered by simple human stubbornness. "Sorry, Your Majesty," Mitchell had said, pulling the pin from a nuclear grenade, "but we're too stupid to know when we're beaten." The explosion that followed lit up the Nexus system like a new star. When the light faded, the Swarm Queen was gone. With her death, the remaining bioships across the galaxy simply stopped fighting and drifted in space like empty shells. The war was over. Now Chen sat in the council chamber, looking around at faces that had once dismissed her with contempt. The same beings who had laughed at human tactics now studied human military manuals like holy texts. Council leader Zixathara stood up, her glowing form more subdued than Chen remembered. "Captain Chen," she began, "the Galactic Council owes humanity a formal apology. We made an error in judgment regarding your species' capabilities." Chen nodded graciously. "Accepted, Council leader. We all make mistakes, but how?" The Altarian representative floated forward, his graceful movements agitated. "How did you know that primitive weapons would succeed where our advanced technology failed?" Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking about all the human soldiers who had died to prove this point, good people who had charged into impossible battles with nothing but courage and kinetic weapons. "We didn't know," she said finally. "We guessed. You see, every species in this room evolved past the need for violence. You developed better ways to solve conflicts, created technologies that made war obsolete. That's good. That's progress." She stood up, addressing the full council. "But humans never stopped being violent. We just got better at it. While you were perfecting energy weapons, we were perfecting ways to kill things with rocks. While you developed psychic abilities, we were learning how to fight things that could read our minds." The Construct Admiral Thorax spoke up. "Your tactics violated every principle of logical warfare." "Exactly." Chen smiled. "The swarm was perfect at adapting to logical, predictable attacks. They could counter any strategy that made sense, but they couldn't adapt to an enemy that looked at a tactical situation and decided the best response was to set themselves on fire and jump at it screaming." The ethereal representative, ancient and wise, asked the question they were all thinking. "What does this mean for the galaxy's future?" Chen looked around the chamber at beings who had ruled space for millions of years, who had built wonders beyond human comprehension, who had achieved heights of civilization that Earth could barely dream of. It means, she said, that maybe civilization isn't about forgetting how to fight. Maybe it's about remembering why fighting matters. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked the worlds that had been freed from the swarm, the systems that were rebuilding, the species that were alive because humans had been too stubborn to stay out of a fight they couldn't win. You spent millennia becoming advanced, becoming evolved, becoming better than your primitive ancestors. But when something came along that wanted to eat civilization itself, you needed someone who remembered how to be primitive. The Corvan trader Thrax, who had always supported humans, spoke up. "What are you proposing, Captain?" "I'm proposing that humanity becomes the galaxy's military protectors. Not because we're the smartest or the strongest or the most advanced, but because we're the only species crazy enough to grab a monster by the throat and drag it down into the mud with us." The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Zixthara spoke. "The council votes to establish humanity as the official military defenders of the Galactic Alliance. You will have full authority to recruit, train, and deploy forces as needed to protect our worlds." The vote was unanimous. Chen felt a weight settle on her shoulders. The responsibility for protecting billions of beings across thousands of worlds. But she also felt something else, pride. Pride in her species and their stubborn refusal to quit, in their ability to look at impossible odds and say, "Hold my beer and watch this." "There is one condition," she said. "Yes? We train your people our way. Not the civilized way, not the advanced way. The human way. Every soldier, every officer, every commander learns to fight like their life depends on it. Because someday it will." Over the following months, military academies across the galaxy began teaching courses with names like Applied Chaos Theory and Primitive Tactics for Modern Warfare. The curriculum included such uniquely human concepts as controlled berserker rage, tactical stupidity, and the art of winning through sheer bloody-mindedness. The elegant Altarians learned to ram their ships into enemy vessels. The logical constructs practiced making decisions based on gut instinct rather than computer analysis. Even the wise ethereals began to understand that sometimes the best plan was having no plan at all. A year later, Chen stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, the Defiance, named after the human cruiser that had sacrificed itself in the first battle against the swarm. She was reading reports from across the galaxy, pirate fleets scattered by human-trained peacekeepers, border conflicts resolved by the threat of human intervention, trade routes kept safe by the knowledge that somewhere out there, humans were watching. Her communications officer approached. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a frontier colony. They're under attack by unknown raiders." Chen nodded. "Prep the fleet for immediate departure." "Standard human response protocol, which is?" Chen's smile was sharp as a blade, carrying the promise of violence to anyone who threatened the innocent. It was the smile that had terrified the swarm, the expression that had convinced the galaxy's greatest civilizations to put humans in charge of their defense. "Find the bad guys," she said, "and hit them with something big and exploding until they stop being bad guys." As the Defiance and its escort fleet jumped to hyperspace, Chen thought about the council meeting where it all began. The aliens who had dismissed humans as primitive barbarians now slept peacefully, knowing that those same barbarians were standing guard. They had doubted humanity's power until humans came to save them. Now they understood that sometimes salvation didn't come from the most advanced species in the galaxy. Sometimes it came from the species that was still primitive enough to care, still violent enough to act, and still human enough to never give up. The galaxy was safe, protected by beings who had never forgotten that before they reached for the stars. They had learned to fight with sharpened sticks and stones, and they were still damn good at it. The 72 hours ended with fireworks, not the celebrating kind. The kind that fell from alien ships and turned city blocks into craters. Admiral Kethvar had expected the humans to surrender in the final hours. Every species did. When the deadline approached, leaders appeared on screens to announce their acceptance of hegemony rule. Populations gathered in designated areas for processing. Military forces laid down their weapons in orderly piles. Instead, at exactly 72 hours, every major city on Earth launched fireworks into the sky. Millions of small explosions painted the night with colors and light. Children ran through streets laughing and pointing at the displays. Adults sang songs and held hands and danced, as if they were celebrating the greatest victory in human history. They were celebrating their refusal to surrender. HFY studied the reports from his command ship. The humans had made no attempt to evacuate their cities or hide their military assets. They had not tried to negotiate for better terms or beg for more time. Instead, they had thrown a planet-wide party to announce their defiance. "Begin pacification," he ordered. The first strike hit London at dawn. A beam of concentrated energy carved through Big Ben and the Parliament buildings like a knife through paper. The ancient structures collapsed into dust and rubble. The Thames filled with debris. But within an hour, humans were climbing through the wreckage with cameras and broadcasters, transmitting images across the planet. A man in a torn suit stood where Parliament had been and spoke into a microphone. "This is London calling. We're still here. We're still free. And we're still saying no." Beijing fell next, then New York, then Moscow. The alien beams carved precise wounds in each city, destroying government buildings and military headquarters while leaving residential areas mostly intact. HFY was being careful. Dead workers could not serve the hegemony, but the humans didn't act like a conquered people. Instead of fleeing, they gathered around the destroyed buildings and began to sing. Instead of hiding, they painted messages on broken walls and uploaded videos to networks the aliens hadn't learned to control yet. The messages all said the same thing in different ways. Still here. Still free. Still fighting. After a week of bombardment, HFY realized he had made a mistake. The humans were not responding like any species the hegemony had conquered before. Usually, destroying the government and military leadership caused immediate surrender. The population would see their protectors eliminated and accept hegemony rule as the only way to survive. But humans seemed to have no central leadership to destroy. When their governments fell, new leaders appeared from nowhere. Teachers and mechanics and shopkeepers who stepped forward to organize resistance. When their armies were scattered, civilians picked up weapons and continued fighting. When their cities were damaged, they treated the ruins as monuments to their defiance. "Deploy ground forces," HFY ordered. "Begin occupation procedures." The landing ships descended like silver rain. Each carried 100 Zephyrian soldiers in powered armor that could stop bullets and energy shields that could deflect explosives. They moved in perfect formations toward strategic targets: power plants, communication centers, transportation hubs. They found the power plants surrounded by humans with homemade bombs. The communication centers had been stripped of useful equipment and filled with booby traps. The transportation hubs were empty except for graffiti that read, "Welcome to Hell" in dozens of languages. Sergeant Vextar led his squad through the ruins of downtown Chicago. His armor sensors showed thousands of humans moving through the city, but every time his unit approached a location, they found it empty. The humans seemed to vanish into the ground like ghosts. "Contact," one of his soldiers reported. "Sniper fire from the tall building, grid 7-7. Vextar's squad returned fire with plasma rifles that could melt steel." The building's top floors exploded in a shower of glass and concrete. But the sniper fire continued from a different building. Then another. Then another. "How many are there?" Vextar demanded. "Sensors show everyone," his communications specialist replied. "Sir, every human in the city appears to be armed." This was impossible. Intelligence reports said humans had limited weapons and no military training. But the resistance was everywhere. Explosives hidden in trash cans, sniper nests in every tall building, booby traps in every doorway. And worst of all, the humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like vermin. They used the city's underground tunnels to appear and disappear without warning. They attacked supply convoys with crude weapons and then scattered before reinforcements could arrive. They targeted communication equipment and medics and officers, violating every rule of civilized warfare. Lieutenant Zexhai was leading a patrol through a residential area when the street exploded beneath his feet. The improvised bomb had been hidden in a storm drain, triggered by remote control from one of the surrounding houses. Half his squad was killed instantly. The survivors found themselves under fire from windows and rooftops as civilians with hunting rifles picked them off one by one. "Request immediate air support," Zexhai screamed into his radio. "We are under attack by the entire neighborhood." But air support was already busy. Every Zephyrian unit on the planet was under attack simultaneously. The humans had somehow coordinated a planet-wide assault using communication methods the aliens couldn't monitor or intercept. They used old-fashioned radios and hand-delivered messages and signal lights and methods that didn't depend on technology the hegemony could disable. Dr. Elena Vasquez crouched in the ruins of what used to be the Boston Public Library, working by candlelight on a piece of alien equipment her team had salvaged from a destroyed patrol. She was a physicist, not a soldier. But the war had made soldiers of everyone. The energy shields operate on quantum frequencies, she explained to the group of engineers and graduate students gathered around her improvised workbench. If we can build a device that disrupts those frequencies, can we? Asked Marcus Chen, a former video game programmer who now spent his days planning ambushes and supply raids. Do we have the materials? Elena held up a circuit board pulled from a smartphone and a copper wire stripped from the library's old electrical system. We're going to find out. Across the planet, similar scenes played out in basements and caves and abandoned buildings. Humans were learning. They dissected captured alien equipment and shared their discoveries through networks of messengers and hidden radio stations. They studied alien tactics and developed countermeasures using materials salvaged from their destroyed cities. They learned that Zephyrian armor had weak points at the joints. They learned that alien energy weapons overheated after sustained firing. They learned that the invaders' rigid military hierarchy made them slow to adapt when their standard procedures failed. Most importantly, they learned that the aliens could be killed. The first Zephyrian prisoner was captured in Detroit when a patrol got trapped in a collapsed building. The humans didn't torture their captive or execute him. Instead, they studied him like a specimen, learning about his biology and psychology and technology. What they discovered changed everything. The Zephyrians were not the unstoppable force they appeared to be. They were creatures evolved for safe, predictable environments. Their advanced technology was designed by minds that had never faced truly desperate opponents. Their military doctrine assumed enemies would fight according to logical rules and surrender, when the math clearly showed defeat was inevitable. But humans didn't follow logical rules. They fought with desperate creativity and suicidal determination. They turned their entire planet into a weapon designed specifically to kill Zephyrians. They sacrificed infrastructure and safety and even lives to achieve tactical advantages that made no sense to alien minds. Admiral Kethavar received casualty reports that shouldn't have been possible. His technologically superior forces were losing ground to primitives with improvised weapons. His carefully planned occupation was turning into a nightmare of constant ambushes and sabotage. Sir, his aide reported, we're also receiving communications from other sectors. The Kretal system has reported unusual resistance activities. The Vorth colonies are experiencing coordinated uprisings. Intelligence suggests the humans are somehow broadcasting their tactics to other conquered species. Kethavar stared at the tactical display showing Earth. The planet was still surrounded by his fleet, but the surface had become a maze of red zones where his forces couldn't safely operate. What was supposed to be a simple occupation had become a war of attrition against an enemy that refused to admit it was beaten. Request reinforcements, he ordered. Sir, command reports that reinforcements are not available. We have situations developing in multiple sectors. Kethavar felt something he had never experienced in 200 years of conquest. Uncertainty. The humans had not just refused to surrender. They had somehow turned their defeat into a weapon and were using it to inspire rebellion across the entire hegemony. On Earth, Sarah Martinez stood in her backyard in Phoenix, looking up at the alien ships that still blocked the sun. Her house was damaged from a near miss during the bombardment. Her neighborhood was half empty as people fled or died or disappeared into the resistance networks. 6 months after the invasion began, Dr. Elena Vasquez made a discovery that changed the war. She was working in her new laboratory, a flooded subway tunnel, beneath Boston where she had set up equipment, salvaged from MIT's destroyed physics department. The tunnel was lit by stolen alien power cells and cooled by water that leaked through cracks in the ceiling. It smelled like rust and sewage and fear, but it was hidden from orbital sensors and connected to the underground network that now served as humanity's nervous system. Elena held up a small device no bigger than a television remote. It was built from smartphone components, copper wire stripped from abandoned buildings, and a crystal core salvaged from a destroyed Zephyrian patrol drone. "This should work," she said to the group of students and engineers gathered around her makeshift workbench. Marcus Chen, who had become one of the Resistance's best tactical coordinators, looked skeptical. "Should work how?" "The alien shields operate by creating a quantum field that deflects kinetic and energy attacks," Elena explained, connecting the device to a car battery. "But if we can disrupt the quantum frequencies they use..." She pointed the device at a piece of Zephyrian armor they had captured from a dead soldier. The armor's surface shimmered with the same energy field that made alien forces nearly invincible. Elena pressed the button. The shimmering stopped. The armor became just metal and ceramic, no different from human-made equipment. "Holy shit," Marcus whispered. Then louder, "Holy shit! You did it!" Within hours, Elena's discovery was spreading through the resistance networks. The design was simple enough to build in basements and workshops. The materials could be found in any electronics store or abandoned car. Most importantly, it worked. The shield disruptor changed everything. Commander Thekmos was leading a patrol through downtown Denver when his squad came under attack from human insurgents hiding in office buildings. Standard procedure was to activate defensive shields and call for air support while suppressing the attackers with plasma fire. But when Thekmos raised his shield, nothing happened. His armor's energy field flickered and died. Around him, his soldiers' shields failed one by one as invisible weapons disrupted their most basic protection. Human bullets, crude and primitive, began punching through Zephyrian armor like it was made of paper. "Shields are down," Thekmos screamed into his communicator. "Repeat, all shields are down." But his communicator was dead too. The humans had learned to target alien communication equipment first, isolating Zephyrian units and preventing them from calling for help or coordinating their response. Thekmos watched his squad die around him, killed by projectile weapons that should have been useless against their technology. He tried to retreat but found his path blocked by humans with improvised weapons and homemade explosives. They moved like they knew exactly where he would go and what he would do, because they did know. After 6 months of constant fighting, humans had learned to predict Zephyrian tactics better than the aliens understood them themselves. The resistance had evolved. Sarah Martinez crouched in the ruins of Phoenix's downtown area, watching a Zephyrian patrol through binoculars. She was no longer the suburban housewife who had watched the invasion begin. War had made her into something harder and more dangerous. Her team consisted of her daughter Emma, who specialized in electronic warfare, her husband Mike, who had become an expert in explosives, and 6 other volunteers from their neighborhood. They had been hunting this particular patrol for 3 days, learning its routes and habits and weaknesses. "Shields are down," Emma reported, monitoring the patrol through equipment she had built from captured alien technology and parts ordered online before the internet was completely disrupted. "Target confirmation. Officer in the center, communications specialist on the left flank." Sarah felt the familiar cold focus that came before combat. "Mike, are your toys ready?" Her husband nodded, his hand steady on the detonator that would trigger explosives hidden throughout the patrol's route. "On your signal." The patrol entered the kill zone. Sarah's team had chosen the location carefully, a narrow street with limited escape routes, surrounded by buildings that provided cover and concealment for the ambush. The aliens moved in their standard formation, confident in shields that were no longer working and following tactical doctrine that humans had learned to exploit. "Now," Sarah said. The street exploded. Hidden charges destroyed the patrol's vehicles and scattered the survivors. Human fighters emerged from buildings and sewers, hitting the confused aliens from multiple directions simultaneously. Shield disruptors made their advanced armor useless. Electromagnetic pulse devices disabled their weapons and communications. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, 7 Zephyrian soldiers were dead and 1 was captured alive for interrogation. But Sarah's team didn't celebrate. They quickly stripped the bodies of useful equipment, collected their own spent ammunition, and disappeared into the underground tunnels before reinforcements could arrive. The war had taught humans to be efficient killers, taking what they needed and vanishing like ghosts. The captured soldier was brought to a secure location where specialists would extract information about alien technology, tactics, and strategic objectives. Humans had become very good at interrogation, using psychological pressure and biological knowledge to break alien prisoners. without causing permanent damage. What they learned from captured enemies was shared instantly across the global resistance network. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison had been a career military officer before the invasion. Now he coordinated resistance activities across the former United States from a command center built in an abandoned missile silo. His staff included former generals and retired sergeants, but also teachers and mechanics and students who had proven themselves in combat. Intelligence reports from 17 different sectors confirmed the same pattern. Morrison announced to the assembled commanders, "The aliens are adapting their tactics, but slowly. Their command structure requires authorization for major changes, and their officers are reluctant to deviate from established procedures." He gestured to a map of North America, covered in red and blue pins representing human and alien positions. "We can exploit this. Every time they change their approach, we're already ready for the new tactics. Our decentralized structure lets us adapt faster than their centralized hierarchy." But Morrison's real achievement wasn't tactical adaptation. It was strategic coordination. Using hidden radio networks, coded internet traffic, and physical messengers, the human resistance had created a communication system that spanned the globe. Lessons learned in Tokyo were applied in London within hours. Weapons developed in São Paulo were being manufactured in Cairo the same day. The aliens controlled Earth's surface and major infrastructure, but humans controlled the flow of information and innovation. They were becoming something the Zephyrian hegemony had never faced, a learning enemy that got stronger with each defeat. Admiral Kethvar studied reports from across the planet with growing concern. His forces had not lost control of strategic objectives, but they were taking casualties at an unsustainable rate. Worse, the humans were capturing advanced technology and learning to use it against its creators. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we've intercepted communications suggesting the humans are planning coordinated strikes against our orbital positions." This was impossible. Human technology couldn't reach space, and their primitive spacecraft had been destroyed in the first days of the invasion. "Explain." "They appear to be constructing rocket-based weapons using our own power sources and guidance systems. The designs are crude but potentially effective against our lower orbit surveillance platforms." Kethvar realized with cold certainty that the humans were no longer just resisting occupation. They were actively trying to take the war into space. And if their ground-based innovations were any indication, they might actually succeed. "Sir, we're also receiving reports from other systems. The Vorth colonies have declared independence. The Creedtal system is in open revolt. Intelligence suggests human communications are somehow reaching other conquered species and inspiring similar resistance movements." The admiral stared at the tactical display showing Earth surrounded by his fleet. What was supposed to be a simple conquest had become a war of attrition against an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. Worse, that enemy was somehow turning their own defeat into a weapon to destroy the entire hegemony. "Request priority reinforcements," he ordered. "This situation must be contained." "Sir, command reports that priority reinforcements are engaged in containing similar situations in 6 other systems. The hegemony is fighting rebellions on multiple fronts for the first time in our history." On Earth, the war continued with mechanical precision. Humans died in enormous numbers, but they also killed aliens with increasing efficiency. They learned from every encounter and adapted their tactics faster than their enemies could respond. They turned their planet into a vast laboratory for studying and defeating Zephyrian technology. Most importantly, they never stopped believing they could win. Elena Vasquez worked 18-hour days in her underground laboratory, developing new weapons and countermeasures. 2 years after the invasion began, Earth had become a death trap designed specifically to kill Zephyrians. The planet's atmosphere now contained microscopic tracking particles that stuck to alien armor and equipment. Every breath the invaders took filled their filtration systems with nanoscale transmitters that broadcast their locations to hidden human sensors. The oceans had been seeded with autonomous minds that could distinguish between human and alien vessels. Even Earth's magnetic field had been artificially modified using a network of hidden installations, creating interference patterns that disrupted Zephyrian navigation and communication systems. Marcus Chen stood in what used to be the basement of a Chicago office building, now serving as the central coordination hub for the global human resistance. The room was filled with salvaged computer equipment, captured alien technology and displays showing the positions of every Zephyrian unit on the planet. He had evolved from a video game programmer into something the aliens had never encountered. A human who treated an entire world as a game board. Target Alpha 7 is moving through Sector 12, reported one of his coordinators, a former air traffic controller named Lisa Park. Estimated squad size, 8 soldiers. Standard patrol pattern. Marcus studied the display. Alpha 7 was Commander Vexnoth, a high-ranking Zephyrian officer who had been responsible for the massacre of civilians in Detroit 6 months ago. Marcus had been hunting him ever since, learning his habits and preferences and psychological profile. Weather conditions? Marcus asked. Heavy rain, limited visibility. Orbital surveillance is compromised by storm clouds. Perfect. Marcus smiled the cold smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Initiate Great Hunt Protocol. All units target Alpha 7 is designated for elimination. Across the city, resistance cells received the coded message and began moving into position. Sarah Martinez led her team through flooded subway tunnels toward the intercept point. Dr. Elena Vasquez activated the atmospheric tracking network to ensure the target couldn't escape. Hundreds of human fighters converged on Commander Vexnoth's location, like antibodies responding to an infection. The Zephyrian commander had no idea he was being hunted. His squad moved through the ruined streets of Chicago with standard tactical spacing, following a patrol route that seemed random, but had actually been carefully mapped by human observers over the course of months. Every step took them deeper into a carefully prepared kill zone. Contact. Vexnoth's point soldier reported. Human movement 2 blocks ahead. Standard procedure was to call for air support and wait for reinforcements. But the humans had learned to jam alien communications during their ambushes, and storm clouds prevented orbital observation. Vexnoth would have to handle this engagement with only his immediate squad. He didn't know that the human movement was bait, designed to draw him toward a building that had been rigged with explosives and filled with hidden fighters. He didn't know that his retreat routes had been blocked by debris positioned to look accidental, but actually placed with mathematical precision. He didn't know that every move he made was being anticipated by humans who had studied Zephyrian tactical doctrine more thoroughly than most. Zephyrian officers, Sarah Martinez watched, through her rifle scope, as the alien patrol approached the kill zone. 2 years of war had taught her patience and precision. She no longer felt anger or fear when killing aliens. She felt the calm focus of a professional doing necessary work. Target acquired, she whispered into her radio. All units stand by. The patrol entered the building through the main entrance exactly as predicted. Motion sensors tracked their progress through the structure, while hidden cameras transmitted their positions to Sarah's team. The aliens moved with military precision, but their doctrine was designed for fighting other soldiers in predictable environments. They had never learned to handle an enemy that turned entire city blocks into elaborate death traps. Charges are set, Mike Martinez reported from his position in the building's basement. Ready to bring it down. Wait for my signal, Sarah replied. The key to hunting Zephyrians was patience. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they understood the situation, then hit them with everything at once. Commander Vexnoth reached the building's 3rd floor before he realized something was wrong. The structure was too quiet, too empty. His sensors detected no human heat signatures, but he could feel eyes watching him from every shadow. This is a trap, he announced to his squad. Begin immediate withdrawal. But when they tried to leave, they found their entrance blocked by debris that hadn't been there minutes before. The other exits were sealed or led to corridors filled with explosive charges. They were trapped in a building that had become their tomb. Now, Sarah said. The building collapsed floor by floor in a controlled demolition that had been planned for months. Support charges severed key structural elements while directional explosives channeled the collapse inward, ensuring that anyone inside would be crushed rather than thrown clear. The entire process took less than 30 seconds. When the dust settled, 8 Zephyrian soldiers were dead, along with one of their most experienced commanders. But more importantly, the aliens now knew that nowhere on Earth was safe for them. Humans could track individual targets across continents and coordinate elaborate assassination attempts that involved hundreds of participants working with perfect timing. The psychological effect was devastating, Admiral. Kethvar received the casualty report in his command ship. Orbiting above Earth, Commander Vexnoth was the 17th high-ranking officer to be killed by human assassins in the past month. The pattern was always the same. Careful surveillance, elaborate preparation, overwhelming force applied at the moment of maximum vulnerability. "Sir," his aide reported, "the humans appear to be systematically targeting our command structure. They're not just fighting randomly anymore. They're conducting strategic elimination of key personnel." Kethvar studied the tactical display showing Earth's surface. His forces still controlled major population centers and infrastructure, but they were confined to heavily fortified compounds surrounded by hostile territory. Every patrol was a potential death sentence. Every mission outside the secured zones resulted in casualties. Worse, the humans had learned to capture alien equipment intact and reverse engineer it with terrifying speed. Reports showed human fighters using modified Zephyrian weapons, wearing adapted alien armor, and operating hybrid vehicles that combined the best features of both technologies. "Sir, we're also receiving distress signals from the outer system monitoring stations. It appears the humans have somehow managed to launch attacks against our orbital platforms. This was impossible. Human space technology had been primitive before the invasion and completely destroyed afterward." "Explain." "They appear to be using large-scale rocket systems with guidance packages built from our own technology. The attacks are crude but effective. 3 monitoring satellites have been destroyed and our orbital surveillance network has significant gaps." Kethvar felt something close to panic. The humans were not just resisting occupation, they were actively trying to break out of their planetary prison and take the war to space. If they succeeded in capturing intact Zephyrian vessels, their technological advancement would accelerate beyond all control. "Deploy all available forces to protect orbital assets. Authorize maximum force against human launch sites." But even as he gave the order, Kethvar knew it was too late. The humans had shown they could coordinate planet-wide operations with perfect timing. If they were planning a space-based assault, they had probably already accounted for his likely responses. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in a hidden facility built inside a hollowed-out mountain in Colorado. The chamber contained humanity's most ambitious project, a space-capable vessel built from captured Zephyrian technology and human engineering. It looked like no ship ever designed by either species, sleek alien curves combined with crude human additions that served functions the original designers had never imagined. "Final systems check," Elena announced to the team of engineers and technicians working around the vessel. "We launch in 6 hours." The ship was humanity's graduation project, proof that they had learned enough from their captors to become something more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. It carried weapons that could damage Zephyrian vessels, shields that could deflect their energy beams, and most importantly, a crew that had been trained to fight in space using tactics no alien military had ever encountered. Captain Sarah Okafor had been a commercial airline pilot before the invasion. Now she was humanity's first starship commander, trained on captured alien flight simulators and educated in space combat by studying recorded battles between Zephyrian forces and other conquered species. "Pre-flight check complete," Sarah reported. "All systems green. Crew is ready for launch." Her crew consisted of 23 humans chosen for their skills, adaptability, and absolute refusal to surrender under any circumstances. They had trained for months in conditions that would have killed most sapient beings, preparing for a mission that was equal parts exploration, combat, and terrorism, because this wasn't just a military strike. It was a message. The captured Zephyrian command ship Kethavarian hung in space like a trophy, its hull scarred by human weapons, and its corridors echoing with voices speaking languages the vessel had never heard before. Captain Sarah Okafor stood on what had once been the bridge of Admiral Kethvar himself, watching her crew integrate human modifications into alien systems. With the casual efficiency of mechanics, working on familiar equipment, communications. "Array is fully operational," reported Lieutenant Chenwei, a former satellite engineer who had become humanity's first interstellar communications specialist. "We're receiving signals from 7 different star systems. The word is spreading faster than we expected." Sarah nodded. 3 months had passed since humanity broke free from Earth's orbital prison and began carrying their message of resistance to the galaxy. The response had been immediate and explosive. Species that had been enslaved for decades suddenly remembered what rebellion looked like. "What's the situation with the Vorth system?" Sarah asked, complete revolt. The local Zephyrian garrison surrendered yesterday after their supply lines were cut by indigenous forces. The Vorth are requesting technical assistance to disable the orbital control platforms. Sarah felt the familiar satisfaction of a plan working perfectly. Humanity's strategy was simple but devastating. Find enslaved species, teach them to fight effectively, then move on to the next system while their former victims continued the rebellion. It was a virus of freedom spreading faster than the hegemony could contain. And the Cretal colonies? 14 worlds have declared independence. They've captured 3 Zephyrian fleet elements and are using the ships to attack neighboring systems. Intelligence suggests they're coordinating with the Althari resistance in the Nexus sector. The bridge's main screen showed a tactical display of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated systems in open revolt against the hegemony. Blue markers showed Zephyrian strongholds still under Imperial control. The pattern was clear. The red was spreading like fire, consuming an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 1,000 years. Dr. Elena Vasquez emerged from the ship's engineering section, her clothes stained with lubricants and her hands covered with burns from working on alien technology. She had become humanity's chief technical advisor, teaching other species how to reverse engineer Zephyrian equipment and adapt it for use by beings the Empire had considered primitive. "The modification packages are ready," she announced. "We can transmit detailed instructions for shield disruptors, communication jammers, and tactical coordination protocols to any species with basic manufacturing capability." This was the key to humanity's success. They didn't just fight the Zephyrians, they taught others how to fight them. Every technical innovation was immediately shared with any species willing to resist Imperial rule. Every tactical lesson learned in Earth's ruins was broadcast to rebel forces across the galaxy. Marcus Chen appeared on the communication screen from his mobile command post aboard a converted human cargo ship. He had evolved from a resistance coordinator to something that had never existed before. A galactic revolutionary, organizing simultaneous rebellions across dozens of star systems. "Sarah, we've got a problem," Marcus reported. "Intelligence intercepts suggest the hegemony is planning a massive counterattack. They're pulling forces from across the Empire and concentrating them for an assault on the Terran system." Sarah wasn't surprised. Earth remained the symbol and source of the galaxy-wide rebellion. If the Zephyrians could recapture humanity's homeworld and eliminate the species that had started the revolt, they might be able to restore Imperial authority over the other systems. But they had misunderstood what Earth had become. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Intelligence estimates 6 standard weeks before they can assemble their force and reach Earth. We're looking at potentially 800 capital ships, supported by planetary bombardment platforms and biological warfare capabilities. 800 ships. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by the hegemony, designed to utterly destroy a single star system and everyone in it. Under normal circumstances, it would be completely unstoppable. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Signal all human vessels," Sarah ordered. "Operation Homecoming is authorized. It's time to go home." Across the galaxy, human ships began turning toward Earth, not to flee but to fight the battle that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They had learned everything they could from 2 years of rebellion and conquest. Now they would put that knowledge to the ultimate test. Admiral Kethvar commanded the hegemony's revenge fleet from his new flagship, a massive dreadnought called Hegemony's Wrath. He had spent months planning this assault, coordinating with military leaders across the Empire to assemble a force that could crush the human rebellion once and for all. "Fleet status report," he ordered as they approached the Terran. "System 812. Capital ships operational and ready for engagement. Planetary bombardment systems are charged and targeting Earth's major population centers. Biological warfare packages are prepared for deployment after initial bombardment." Kethvar studied the tactical display. Earth appeared defenseless. No major fleet elements, no orbital fortifications. No signs of the massive military buildup that should have been humanity's response to an approaching armada. "Sir, we're detecting approximately 50 human vessels in the outer system. Mixed types. Mostly converted civilian ships with improvised weapons. They appear to be maintaining position near the asteroid belt. 50 ships against 800. Even allowing for human tactical creativity, the math was hopeless." Kethvar felt a moment of disappointment. He had expected the species that had caused so much trouble to put up a more impressive final battle. Begin the assault. Eliminate all human vessels, then proceed with planetary bombardment. I want this system sterilized completely. The hegemony fleet advanced in perfect formation toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming numerical superiority and technological advantage. They had learned to respect human determination, but 50 ships could not defeat 800 no matter how cleverly they were commanded. What they didn't know was that the 50 ships were not Earth's entire defense force. They were bait. Captain Sarah Okafor watched the approaching Zephyrian fleet from the bridge of her flagship, a vessel that had once belonged to the alien empire but now served human purposes. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of veterans who had spent 2 years learning to fight impossible odds. All units report ready, Lieutenant Chen announced. The trap is set, Sarah smiled. The asteroid belt around Earth's system had been turned into the largest weapons platform ever constructed. Every significant asteroid contained hidden missile batteries, shield generators, and communication relays. The entire belt was one vast minefield designed specifically to destroy Zephyrian capital ships. But that wasn't the real trap. Signal from the Vorth fleet, Chen reported. They're in position. Kretal forces report ready. Althari squadron standing by. Nexus Alliance confirms battle readiness. Sarah's smile widened. The real trap wasn't the asteroid belt. It was the fact that humanity's rebellion had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. The galaxy's enslaved species had learned to fight, and they had come to Earth to settle old scores with their former masters. All units, Sarah announced on the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Okafor. Today we end 1,000 years of slavery. Today we teach the galaxy that freedom is not something you ask for. It's something you take. The hegemony fleet advanced into the asteroid belt, confident in their shields and armor. The first wave of missiles came from hidden batteries scattered throughout the belt. Not enough to seriously damage 800 capital ships, but enough to activate their defensive systems and make them predictable. Admiral Kethvar watched his point ships return fire, obliterating asteroid after asteroid in displays of raw destructive power. Maintain formation. Continue advance. Human weapons cannot penetrate our shields. But the human weapons weren't trying to penetrate Zephyrian shields. They were designed to disrupt them. Elena Vasquez's shield disruptor technology had evolved far beyond the crude devices built in Earth's ruins. The new systems could disable an entire fleet's defenses simultaneously, leaving advanced alien warships as vulnerable as primitive vessels. Shields down across the entire enemy formation, Chen reported. All Allied fleets, you are cleared to engage. Space around Earth exploded into chaos as ships appeared from every direction. The Vorth fleet emerged from hyperspace directly behind the Zephyrian formation. Kretal vessels decloaked and began firing at point-blank range. Althari fighters swarmed through the confused Imperial ranks like angry wasps. But the real shock came when Admiral Kethvar realized that many of the attacking ships had once belonged to the hegemony itself. Captured vessels operated by former slaves using Zephyrian technology and tactics against their creators. Sir, we're surrounded. How is this possible? Our intelligence showed no major fleet concentrations in this system. Kethvar understood with horrible clarity. The humans hadn't been preparing to defend Earth. They had been preparing to destroy the entire hegemony fleet in one massive battle.